Well, as everyone knows, after a conversation with Governor DeWine this afternoon and ultimately his news conference today, he did announce and make a very strong recommendation, along with the state superintendent of schools, that our events could continue, however, continue on a very limited basis with fan attendance. And knowing the significance that our events play in the life of a high school student, he did agree, Governor DeWine did agree to allow parents to attend the contests, and I commend him for that because of, you know, certainly the time, the effort, sometimes the money that our parents have put in for those kids, and, you know, to make that happen. So, you know, our staff has heard me say this many times where I talk about hoping for the best and planning for the worst. Well, we have been doing that for several days, planning for the worst case scenario that might develop. Doesn't make it any easier, but at the same time, we're going to go on with our events and try to make the most memorable experience that we can for the student athletes, the coaches, and the schools that are involved. So with that, I'll certainly entertain any questions.
How many parents, how many spectators per student? Is that how it's gonna go?
It will, and understanding a little bit that we've had just a few hours to really come to grips with what that final announcement would be. In other words, whether no fans could attend or whether parents could attend. So we've had a little bit of time to work with that. We're trying to be conscious of the fact that, you know, from the student athlete side, you know, 2 parents just doesn't always make it. So we're trying to be conscious of that a little bit, and probably we'll settle on the number of 4 per participant. When I say participant, per player, student athlete. So we have not finalized that number, but I will say that we will communicate that to our schools this evening. I should emphasize as part of that, that we, with our girls, 16 girls teams that are in the state tournament starting on Thursday, that we had a conference call with all 16 schools immediately following the news conference by the governor.
What about the ticketing system, or are you guys still kind of working out the specific details?
We are, and it's complicated. You know, our staff is really going to be taxed on this, and part of the complication lies in the fact that right now we are dealing with 2 different venues for our state tournaments, but we also have 16 different regions going on in boys basketball right now. And that same recommendation, that same outcome of this is going to be affecting those regional sites as well. So each site has different ticketing methods that they're using, and that's a challenge for our staff to work together to make that work.
Will there be medical professionals on hand? I mean, will each of these 4 people and students be screened for health concerns? We discussed that at a staff meeting today, and right now, since that is a site issue, we're not 100% ready to answer that at this point. I will tell you it's on our table to address. Again, since it's a site issue, that we have a little bit more time in that regard than we do working with the schools on all the logistics that affect the schools.
What would you say to parents who are kind of like upset by this, or grandparents, aunts and uncles?
And first of all, there will be many. And we have to consider the safety aspect, the health aspects of this first. And I know the challenges that creates, and it would be wrong for me to go against the governor and the state superintendent's recommendation. And not only would it be wrong, I have to support that, and I do support that. We're in a unique situation right now. And even Governor DeWine today said, you know, it's not really true to say that we're getting ahead of this. We're not. We're trying to deal with the situation the best way we can deal with it to prevent the spread. And when I look at it from that point of view, I feel strongly that we have to do what we need to do, especially when I'm talking to parents and grandparents.
Has there been any sales of tickets that might need to be refunded as a result of this?
One of the biggest challenges that we have, that we talked to the schools just before coming onto this, is the challenge with that, because so many schools, and I don't mean to single out any, but Napoleon has had tremendous attendance throughout the tournament in the girls that coming up to the state tournament. The entire Henry County probably bought a ticket to come to the state tournament. The entire Henry County needs to have their tickets refunded and also be told they're not going to be able to all attend the game. So that is a huge challenge. But once again, we started looking at options on how to do that. And I'm hopeful that by probably this evening, later on, we will communicate with the schools on the process on how to get money back to them, refund their ticket monies, and move forward. So we are looking at two things right now. That we're looking at what's already been done, sale of tickets, things like that. But we're also at the same time looking at going forward. And I think we've recognized that pretty well. We know the urgency of going forward, that we can put that refund or those things that have already happened a little bit to the side so we can move forward.
And you have a ballpark figure on how that's going to affect budgeting in the OHSAA, and as far as, you know, how you're going to fund things in the future?
I don't know if I have the words to describe it. You know, you look at the model that we currently have to fund this organization, where it's based upon an 80-10-10. When I say 80-10-10, 80% on ticket sales, 10% on corporate partnerships, and 10% on officials' dues. We all know what's happening to officials, the number of them. So that number is declining. Our partnerships have been pretty flat, you know, in today's world. 80% of our revenues are derived from ticket sales. I don't know if I have the proper word at this point to describe, you know, what impact it's going to have, but maybe significant is the best word I can find at this time.
Could this at some point come down to a pay-to-play for schools that don't normally have that?
You know, right now, it's not so much a pay-to-play as it is, our organization is one of few that does not charge a single dime for our schools to participate in the tournament. We don't charge a single dime for them to be a member of this association. Schools that are coming to the state tournament this week still will have, within mileage restrictions, will have hotels paid for them. We want that to be part of the experience. Those things will be taxed, there's no question. But again, we have a very smart staff that will look at every single possibility to, you know, curtail our expenses, increase revenues where we can do it, but at the same time, ultimately to provide the same experiences that we are for the kids. That's what we exist for.
Is there any effort or talk or discussion about having these things televised to people that will not be allowed to go to them, you know, whether they be streaming or, you know, whatever method you might use?
That is significant for us. We want our people to see the event. That's good for our brand, that's good for what we do, and we will. And we're in the process of doing that. Fortunately, again, I have staff that is working in that area to make sure that those that can't attend will have an opportunity to see it. I'm pretty confident about that.
I'm curious about timeline. I mean, when we're referring to maybe just the 4 parents or 4 loved ones only, is that just for the games through this weekend, or what kind of timeline are we talking about?
Realistically, we are talking about, I should back up when I say this just a minute, that tonight, we have regional tournaments going on. And when I spoke to the governor, I was very clear that I was not certain at this point that in the short time frame with games at some sites starting at 6 p.m., that we could shut down those sites adequately. I just don't think that's possible. So the governor told me, you do what you need to do. We had schools that were already on buses, and we were able to communicate, but the games are going on tonight as scheduled with fans. We had no choice but to do that. It was the right decision to do that. But moving forward, we're rushed as quick as tomorrow at some of our regional sites to have all of this answered and in place. And I know that, you know, some of our staff members are here. They took some time to come down here because they're working diligently right now to make that happen.
So through the weekend, I'm just...
Going forward, a good point. Our boys tournament basketball is next weekend, and so it will be at least through next weekend. I think one of the things, I was on a call yesterday with the CDC, and again, some of the givens about this, you know, there were two things that were stated. I mean, in addition to when are vaccines gonna be developed, and I'm not saying I don't care about that, certainly I do, but from the logistical standpoint of conducting events, I was more concerned about the two givens that the CDC said. Number one, this will get worse before it gets better. And I think we all believe that. And two, that we are at the mercy of local health departments, state health departments, and the governor. So given those two, I'm looking ahead. We had discussion this morning, I believe, on starting to look ahead to spring sports and what that could mean. Now, given that the state superintendent was in the governor's office today on the call with me, you know, right now, to my knowledge, there's not a single school in Ohio that's been closed due to this. But I think we can all anticipate, again, with the hope for the best, plan for the worst, that that may happen. We even have developed plans here, which the CDC recommended, in case we must work from home. And we're all ready to do that should, you know, so, but again, our business slows down considerably if schools are out too. But we've looked ahead, even so far as our spring tournaments, and are starting to look at that.
So, but at least for right now, I just wanna make sure I say it accurately, starting tomorrow and likely through the boys' basketball state championship games.
Yes,
correct?
likely, and I would even,
Likely.
yes, most likely, because we're planning that this will go through that point in time, yes.
Thank you.
Is there any consideration of maybe moving the state boys ahead a few weeks, or is that?
We talked about it. That was one of the options that we as a staff, we went through every single possibility, and we just felt that, given that original thing I mentioned about hope for the best, or excuse me, that, you know, that's gonna get worse before it gets better, and taking that advice, we just felt strongly that moving it would just delay that we're gonna have to do it again. So we looked at, we did come to a consensus, I believe it was Friday, that if anything happened to whether it was gonna be shut down completely, now that's one thing, I mean, we'd have to look at that at that point, but if it was this scenario where they were to continue and limited fans, that we would continue and not delay it. We made that decision basically on Friday.